Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Punattu Saha Viryam Karavavahe Tejasvinavati Tamastu Ma Vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So we left off on verse 15 and the first topic, just as a reminder, the self pervades the world. There, even the title itself, you start to think about what does that mean. It indicates your real identity pervades everything, your body, mind, intellect, your world, your universe. Yet we've lost that identity. So our focus is on the body, mind, intellect, world, the material, transient aspects of the world. And deluded by this, we seek the world, but that wise one, and we've all got to draw that out from within us to devise that wisdom, that wise one, 11 to 19, the deluded disregard the self, it's saying, the one who's focusing on the world, but the wise one glorifies and seeks the self. So in order to do that, you've got to actually understand what this self is that you're going to go after. Because you can see your world of objects and beings and things and relationships and things you aspire for to achieve, the world where you get a promotion or a name or a fame or you get some money. You can see all of what that does, and if you've recognized it, you also recognize that it doesn't last very long. But some of the things are still there for a long time. You know, people historically collect, oh, that's from a couple of 100 years ago. But a couple of 100 years ago, what are you holding on to? It stops you moving forward, in fact, when you hold on all to these trinkets of your past. It's actually thinking, what are you doing now to move forward? To let go of things that you don't need, those trifling toys you're holding on to, that possession. So the wise glorify and seek the self. And in verse 14, we actually left off on 15. In 14, he's talking about karma and bhakti. You know, these verses have a sequence of giving you karma, bhakti, jnana, dhyana, and then they go again in a cycle. This is the method of the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads. They give a cycle, a process of what you've got to do, and you'll pitch up onto whatever's of interest or your predominant nature is. You get hooked onto that and you can work on that. So in 14, glorifying me, satatam, always, glorifying yourself, always. So your devotion, your bhakti is focused on something higher. Your emotion is always backed on a focus of something higher. Shraddha, you've got a focus, consistency of purpose to the end. Nitya yukta upasate, eternally joining through your spiritual pursuit with the self. So you're active, you're not passive. The spiritual journey is not without action. To the extent you need to do that, you must do that. So karma yoga, that focus beyond your self-interest, beyond your work that you get paid for, beyond to make your needs happen. It's beyond that. That's very self-centered. It's beyond your family. That's self-centered. You might do something because family you get something out of. It's not really unselfish. is with your interest. In your community, you might do something for your name or fame. It's not unselfish. You get that name and fame. You may not get something material. So it's beyond that sort of perception, emotion, thought. So we've got to up it in our own societies, our own self, in our karma, what we do, in our bhakti, that emotion, surrendering to something greater that we don't know. It's not just on the weekends or whenever you come to something like this. Maybe some of you do a class more than once a week. You go somewhere else, who knows? Maybe you do a puja for 1 hour in the morning, a worship. Maybe you go on Sunday, but it's not. Remember what it was. Remember what it said in last week. Spiritual practice is what? And what is it not? We've said it a number of times, so maybe I'm hoping you might remember this phrase. At least if we remember the phrase, there can be some possibility of thinking about it. Tim.
It's not a part-time occupation.
Yes. It's a full-time awareness of truth. If it's part-time, it's like putting, somebody gave me this example once, a student in class. It's like you put the water on to boil and then you go away and then you come back and you take it off because you've gone to do something. Then you put it back on to boil. It's like you're simmering something, but it's never getting hot. So you want hot water. So you put it on to boil, it boils a little bit. And before it gets to the boiling point, you take it off because you're distracted with something else. And then you put it on again until there's none left. So it's actually as good as not having put the water on to boil. So our spiritual pursuit can't be a little bit now and then you forget about it. And then you come back and do a little bit and forget. It's a full-time awareness of truth. That's your bhakti, your devotion. You've got it in the back of your mind, in whatever you pursue in your day. And then you think, okay, I've got this thought. How do I act on it to refine my perceptions, emotions, and thoughts? How do I refine myself to get to that truth? Why do I want to get to that truth? You've got a constant thinking, reasoning going on. When you trip up, you think, right, what have I not done quite right? Let me try and redo it. Karma, bhakti, karma. How do I act upon it? You don't just do, right, I've done my karma for half an hour. Tick, brownie points. It doesn't work like that. And the rest of the day, it's all self-interest. And you expect life to go smoothly and happily. It doesn't happen like that. Right, I need to do some karma. I can tell that person, I've done the karma. You didn't do it for that person, you did it for yourself. And you cheat yourself when you don't. Be consistent in that. You don't cheat anybody else. So karma, bhakti, jnana. Verse 15, we had began last week. Jnanam. I think we just read the verse, is that right? We read the verse, have you explained it? Let's have the verse again. We'll have the chant.
Jnana chakyanye yajanto mamupasate ekartvena prathatvena bahudha vishvato mukham.
Sam, if you could read the verse.
Verse 14, always glorifying.
15.
Oh, we're 15. So verse 15. Yet others sacrificing by the yajna, sacrifice of knowledge, worship me as one, as distinct and as manifold, facing all directions.
So we have sacrifice in bhakti, yajna. Remember this yajna, it's a ritual. And if you remember, those of you who've done chapter 4, the whole chapter 4 is talking about yajna, sacrifice. So it's a ritual. So you collectively sacrifice to the higher, yajna, service and sacrifice. So here he's talking about the sacrifice of your ignorance with your knowledge. So you're offering up your ignorance. You're taking on board knowledge of the self, not ordinary knowledge. It could be knowledge which is objective knowledge, but here we're talking about the knowledge of the self. So there's an understanding. What are you sacrificing in terms of your ignorance? You gain knowledge and your ignorance drops. So the offering is ignorance as you gain knowledge. Can everybody hear me? So there's an understanding in the knowledge that the self is everywhere. And we are a multitude of the heterogeneous variety, but there's a homogeneous principle functioning in all of us. There's a unity in the diversity. This is the knowledge that it is putting across. So that person who can comprehend the unity in the diversity sees the self in all beings. In Adi Sankaracharya's Bhajagovinda, Vindan, which we're going to start at the end of March on Tuesday evening, for your information, anybody who'd like to join. He has a verse which talks about what is jnana, what is knowledge of the self, what do you have to do? So he goes, nitya anitya viveka vicharya. It's that distinction between what's transient and passing and what's ephemeral and what's eternal. And we've got to make that distinction in the knowledge. Nitya anitya viveka vichara. The distinction, the awareness that your life is transient, fleeting. So one's got to fix upon something permanent within. So every facet of this life that we lead is transient, and we've got to observe it so. If it's transient, it can't be real. It doesn't stand the test of reality in philosophical terms. It doesn't stand the test of what's in the past. If it's real, it should be the same in the past as it is in the present, and it will be in the future. But our world doesn't stand that test. It's transient, it's always changing. The definition of world means flux of change. We're changing. From the moment we come into this classroom and we leave, we've changed. We might not see it, but we see our change over a period of years. You know, if you look at your photograph when you were a child and you look at it now, you think, oh my God, is that me? You might say, thank God, that was me, but now this is what is me. Who knows what you might think, but there's a change. So it's trying to get you to focus in this spirit of yajna, off the unreal, changing factors, and onto the reality, the real, changeless factor. So that one who's able to contemplate such is a jnani. A jnani is not somebody who keeps reading the Bhagavad Gita. What do we mean by that? What am I talking about? Guru.
I remember, I think, listening to this in some other chapter, Paraji, between Jnani and Jijnasu. So somebody who probably kind of goes through the scriptures, probably is scholarly, doesn't necessarily mean that they have got the real wisdom, the knowledge.
Yeah. So you can keep collecting out of curiosity knowledge. In fact, you know, somebody may feel if you can't quote the scriptures X, Y, Z as they might know it, you know, that you haven't spiritually evolved. But they're full of knowledge. So they've got that vertical knowledge, but there's no, they've got that horizontal knowledge, but there's no vertical depth. There's no depth. So on the surface, it looks pretty to everybody, but there's no depth. There's no wisdom. So it's a constant practice of jnana. So you pitch up knowledge, you reflect on it in your study, reflection, and then you put that into practice. Whatever degree you've understood, take some more. This is the yajna going on. So you're constantly defacing your ignorance. So you're offering up your ignorance in gaining the practice of gaining knowledge of the self, jnana. Study, reflect. Reflect is more important. Study and reflect, we mean reflect on it. Don't take in lots of knowledge. Think over it. Let it digest in you. When's the best time to do that? Suggested best time. When are you all doing it?
First thing in the morning.
First thing in the morning. And what's first thing in the morning? Best time?
Dawn?
Huh?
Should be doing it at dawn.
So what time is it? Roughly.
At 4 or 5?
Exactly. 6 o'clock's too late. If you're serious. If not, any time will do. Anything's better than nothing. It's good starting, at least. So a little bit of scripture, a little bit of Bhagavad Gita to gain this wisdom, or whatever the scripture, so that you can see the divinity in the diversity. Could you imagine what our world would be if we could all see divinity instead of diversity? We'd enable all the differences to coexist because we understand divinity. But because we don't understand divinity, all the differences are like bombardments on our, it's like a, what's the word? It's like a battle on ourselves. So we fight that battle outside. We don't understand how to relate. So it's a little bit at a time to gain this knowledge. Drip, feed it every morning, a little bit. Let it sink in. Do your karma bhakti jnana. A little bit more next day. Karma bhakti nam. Don't worry if it doesn't all go according to plan. Just keep practicing that. Karma bhakti jnana. Eventually get to dhyana. Initially you start with yoga just to keep yourself fit. When you're not fit, you're good for nothing. That's not spiritual discipline, just keeping fit. It's one aspect of entry point. So let's read it.
The preceding verse spoke of the paths of action and devotion, karma and bhakti yogas, while this verse indicates the path of knowledge, jnana yoga. Jnana yoga does not mean mere erudition and scholarship in spiritual literature. It does not depend upon your mastery and command of the scriptures. True jnana, knowledge, is marked by the awareness of the unifying reality in the pluralistic world, recognizing the unity in diversity, perceiving the eternal principle in the ephemeral world, realizing the self in all beings as the one supreme being.
So in that paragraph alone, how many times has he said the same thing? Why does he do that? Anybody? Four times in one short paragraph.
To stress the importance of it, of doing that.
Mm-hmm. And what else? That's one aspect. Babita?
It is like reinforcing something, and
Mhm.
also maybe saying it in a different ways from something you will understand, or something you'll understand some way. You know, if you don't understand this, you may understand this way, sort of thing. You know, like
Yeah.
trying a different way of teaching.
We do that with kids. If they don't get it that way, let's try this way.
Yeah.
To get them to do something.
Sorry,
But,
Parvati, I'll have to probably cut off early today because I've got a hospital appointment, so I'll be going. That's why I've got it on the off. So I'll be listening, but I probably won't be able to participate
That's all right.
actively. Okay, thank you.
Tim, did you have something?
No, I think Babita spoke my words well. We all hear things in different ways, and so perhaps it's a way of allowing each of us to hear this truth in a different way.
Mm. So whatever you take best, use it. And if it's not in this verse, it'll be in another. There's 700 of them and one. Let's read to the next. Sam.
Can I just ask a quick question, or should I wait till we finish?
Go ahead, it's fine.
Sure. I guess I was just asking about this true knowledge is marked by the awareness of the unifying reality in the pluralistic world. It seems to me that this is more like a mystical knowledge in a way, because you draw that truth from within you as opposed to reading something and reflecting on it. It's something much more experiential. It sounds like, because right now when I'm looking at the world, perhaps like I might intellectually try to conceptualize this unity of being or this unity in diversity. Like when I see a tree, when I see a human being, or when I see another aspect of the world, right? But for someone who has reached that awareness of being able to be aware of the unifying reality in the pluralistic world, that is something that is not some mere intellectual understanding. I mean, it might make sense from an intellectual point of view that you try to make sense of it. Okay, everything, there's a unifying reality behind it, humans, nature, da 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 da. But it's something that will probably come as a mystical or like a kind of an experiential knowledge. Yeah, I
So
just
it's
thought
not a knowledge then. You are
yeah,
that.
yes.
But the point here is he's talking about jnanam. What have you got to actually think about in order to get to that? So you've got to reflect on this. Like you said, I may not conceive in the tree there's a divinity. I may not conceive in the cow there's divinity, so I can eat the cow. I don't have any regard for it. Yeah. When you see the divinity in the diversity, you can't do it any harm. You have to fall in sync, you see. So the more one evolves, the more one sees that unity in all the different things. So we become acutely aware of what we've got to do. So we go into the world, we have needs, we take what we need, but no more than that. Fully aware we don't need to take more than necessary. We don't want to cause any disruption. We've just got to play in harmony. Otherwise, it's not spiritual. So what you're talking about when you say mystical, you're talking from the standpoint that when you realize you're not thinking this, you're out of the world. It's like somebody looking at, it's not like somebody, you can't compare it, but as a metaphor, it's like a realized person looks at the world like a grain of sand. There's no big deal in it. But to us, it's all a big deal because there's so many things going on in our perceptions, emotions, and thoughts, which we haven't sorted out, that we use the world as our battleground because we can't go within. But the minute we start going within, this in practice begins as an intellectual concept, begins as an idea of action, begins as a feeling of devotion, but it sublimates into a reality of your life. If you keep it as an intellectual concept, what's written in the book only, that's where it stays. But the minute you start to practice this, you become aware of how can I kill those innocent creatures from my palate? Another person will argue they're there for us to eat. But once you become aware that they're sentient beings, you can't do it. There's no right or wrong in it. You just can't do it. It's your awareness of unity. And then you step it up to other things and other things. And there's some places you have to live. So you make distinctions of what you allow yourself with an awareness that you will pay the consequences of that if it's out of sync. So these become realities in practice.
Thank you.
It stays intellectual if you don't use it. Often people comment when they can't. It's nice that you asked this question. People comment on scriptural texts like this as though it's too far away and intellectual. It's not valuable for everyday living. And the reason one does that is because you don't use it to up yourself to be able to translate it into life. It's not understood. Once you understand it and start using, that's why we have classes like this, because it's not easy to understand. You have to break it down. Thank you for asking.
Thank you. I guess it sounds to me that it is beyond the mind when we understand or truly understand or this knowledge of the unity and diversity. When we unite with our soul, perhaps we can
There's
see
no
the
mind.
world. Yeah.
And you're not this person then, something else.
Yeah.
right now with the mind, intellect, body, individual. Guru.
Sorry, I think.
Sorry, 1 minute. Sam, okay.
Yeah, all good. Thank you.
I think
Good.
when you were answering Sam's question, I just had a follow-up. So is Jnana Yoga then, if it's all about knowledge, and if knowledge is not really about scriptures or reading literature, so does it mean that a jnani doesn't necessarily have to really go through the grind of having to read the literatures or the scriptures, but probably has to do more of an inward looking exercise? Is that what jnani is all about then? Somebody who looks at within himself or herself.
So the whole of the spiritual path is to look within oneself and draw out that universal aspect. You use a scripture to help you, a teacher to help you, and a bigger intellect than one has. So it speeds up the journey. To do it by oneself, you can do it by oneself. But it becomes tricky at some stages. And your mind has a capacity to wander off any which way, astira chanchala. So it keeps you focused in reflecting on a point to then act out what your vasanas are. So it's helpful. So it's not necessary. And it's like this. If you meet a person that you never met before and they're a PhD mathematician or more, they don't need to go through the classes that you may need to go through to get there, because they've already done it. So they don't need to read any books. They've already done it. Yes. But if they are interested, they need to take something on board, and it may well be scriptural. Scriptural is just knowledge handed down. Yeah. And the beauty in Vedanta is when this knowledge is handed down, it's actually asking you to question and think and draw it out of yourself. It's never, in truth, people may do different things, but it's never asking you to take it and accept that authority. It's actually asking you to say, here is the information. This is there to help you as a catalyst to draw it out of yourself. So in which case, doing it on your own. See, one of the things that Swamiji used to say to us is, I've spent 60 years compiling Vedanta treatises, compiling the books, the literature, so that you don't have to spend that lifetime to do it. So you've got a head start, a kick start to actually look at it comprehensively, so you can evolve faster than putting in all the groundwork of doing it. So that's what's helpful about it. Or you can do it yourself without any of it. And maybe you're in a position to do it. But rare indeed is that one who can. So agreed, you don't need scriptures. But in another way, you see, in the scriptures itself, it says, throw away the scriptures, throw away the Vedas. It's got to come from you. If you hold on to them, you've got scholarship, erudition, you've got that sort of education. It has to be drawn out from you. But you'd be wise to, if you've got it in front of you, try to use it and help yourself quicker. That's all. That's all it's for. Because it's tricky. All day long, we are bombarded with information from the world which distracts us into fleeting values. And this is just trying to hold our attention on something universal. It's tricky to do that. So it's giving us methods, different ways to practice to get ourselves to that status. And then drop the scripture, I would say. Wouldn't do it before that, unless you're very competent. You don't need it. That makes sense?
Yeah, it does. Apology. Yeah, I got this. Thank you.
Babita.
Yeah, just wanted to add to that there have been some people who have this knowledge without even education. So Kabir is one name that pops up in my head, that he didn't go to school or he didn't learn, it just came from within. So yeah, it is possible.
You are just drawing it from within.
Yeah.
We don't know what Kabir really had. In the old days, there was no scriptures as such. It was handed down by word of mouth. We don't know who he spoke to. We don't know what state he was at when he came on the earth too. Maybe he got it somewhere else. So you're quite right. But the question you should ask yourself, are you a Kabir? Are you a Rumi? Are you a Christ? Are you at that stage? So then you don't need any of these books. That's all you have to ask. Tim.
Just to add to Guru's point, I once heard Satguru claim he'd never read the Gita, but I think he was teasing the audience.
Yeah. You make your own opinions, who is who and what is what. The thing about it is to actually look at what do you need. You get a glimmer of what you feel you've got to inspire yourself with. You don't have to depend on the authorities of others. You have to do your own investigation. And if there's something which can help you, use it. See, all of this, we're doing the Bhagavad Gita, but the literature which is laid down by Swamiji is actually laid down not by him. He's just collected it from different places, compiled it, and put it in a language where we can easily understand it. That's all he would say is done. But and the mastery of it. But what is the first and foremost thing that is being put forward here? Educate yourself to think clearly. Then you can go into X or Y or Z and decide, is that valuable or not? Otherwise, you've got to go on blind belief. And somebody says something, you've got to go with it if you're not a thinker. And where you trip up, or it's you want to move yourself forward, keep thinking. Even if you trip up, it doesn't matter. Keep thinking. So learn the technique, that skill of living by developing your intellect. And that will lead you to the side of it, which is spiritual. Or you can use your intellect for gross things and become materially well endowed. It's your choice, or both. Depends on your nature. But you use it for spiritual evolution if you truly know what's what. Let's go a bit more.
Here again, me refers to the Supreme Self within you. The Self is the one all-pervading reality, but its manifestations are manifold. Just as your body is one, but its reflections could be manifold. Your body can produce countless reflections through countless reflecting surfaces. He who sees the reality in and through the names and forms constituting this world sees the unifying self in its infinite manifestations, becomes a man of true knowledge, Jnani.
So we should reflect on that. Sees the divinity in a manifold diversity. See, in order to do that, you've got to see it within yourself so you can reflect it out. If you've got hiccups with yourself, that's to the extent you can reflect out. And you've got to, so you really got to deal with yourself on the material, the physical, the emotional, the intellectual, and the spiritual levels. Spiritually, you gain this, and if you gain this spiritual knowledge, you'll start dealing with all of the other. You want to get rid of those vasanas to see that unity. Vasanas stop you. Let's read the last part.
The word yajna here refers to fire worship. In this ritual, the fire consumes the grains offered by the worshippers. The yajna symbolizes destruction of ignorance in the fire of knowledge, a spiritual practice defining the path of knowledge.
So you offer up your ignorance by taking on spiritual knowledge. As you say, it doesn't need to be from scripture. You can be sitting, talking with somebody whose higher values, drawing it out. So this yajna ritual, fire worship ritual, was to remind us constantly, you know, people would come together and they'd all bring grains. It was a cooperative, all bring something. And prayers would be chanted, like as the ritual goes on. We'll offer the grains into the fire shoots up. Offer the ghee, the oil into the fire shoots up. So a cooperative, collective endeavor enables productivity. And in that productivity, the tradition is then all take the remnants of the sacrifice. So whatever you've put in, you just take what you need from what you've put in to go on to the next stages, cooperatively working. You take out what you need to go on to the next stage. So it becomes very productive and everybody's benefits from it. So everybody's able to carry on with what they're supposed to do. So you offer knowledge, your ignorance is kindled. You could do that in form of a discussion. You offer, you gain knowledge, and then you discuss it. So you're drawing it, churning it over to draw out that truth. We should do that. That's why I encourage you all to talk. You churn it over, it gets digested in you, you benefit, enables you to go on to the next stage. Hence why I always recommend the Academy. There's constant discussion going on. Taking in knowledge, reflection in the morning, with class you take in the knowledge, discussion in the evening, constantly debating and discussing till the penny drops and you transform yourself and go in each aspect. And you take in some more. The focus is always on the truth within all the diversity. There's lots of diversity going on. Yajna. So your whole life becomes worship. That's important. Karma, bhakti, jnana. You're constantly engaged in yajna. Everything's a yajna. You oblate it to the self. Everything you do, you wake up, oblate it to the self. Thought. You don't have to do a long prayer, just the thought itself. Brushing your teeth. So you synchronize your routine, you oblate it to the self. Everything you do. Your work, you ablate it to yourself. You cheat somebody, ablate it to the self. You do something good, ablate it to the self. You do something because it needs to be done, ablate it to the self. You eat the wrong foods, ablate it to the self. There's a constant focus of getting in tune with the self. And then you work collectively, you ablate it to the self. You take what you need, everything becomes Brahman. Let's go to 16.
Aham kraturaham yajnaha swadhahamaham mantrohamahame ahamatmiraham bhutam.
Renu, if you could read the verse. Thank you.
I am Kratu, Vedic ritual. I am Yajna, sacrifice. I am Swadhyaya, ancestral offering. I am Asuda, medicinal herb. I am Mantra, chant. I am Ajya, clarified butter. I am Agni, fire. I am Huta, burnt offering.
So essentially, all of these, aham, I am, aham, I am Brahman speaking, I am the Brahman. In all of these things, I am that self, in all of these things. So when we do the yajna as a ritual, all of those which is mentioned there are part of what you do physically in that ritual as such. The sacrifice, it contains all of those things. They're all symbolic. But essentially, the whole idea is, I am Brahman. Aham Brahma Asmi. I am Brahman. And one of the things which is just always, we're reminded in meal times we have a prayer. It's actually from chapter 4. We have a prayer at meal times in the academy. It's Brahman is everything, basically. And it's done at meal times because you're the most vulnerable when it comes to whether you're deprived of food or food. Everything gets obliterated in your mind when food comes in. It's like gross, but it's allowed in spiritual parlances. Anything you can indulge in is food because you're restraining in so many other areas. So when you are hungry and you can't focus, he says, Brahmapanam Brahmahavihi, Brahmagno Brahmanahutam, Brahmeva tena gantavyam, Brahma karma samadhina. I'm that fire in the stomach which allows you to eat, allows you to digest the food, is the Brahman. Allows you to want the food is Brahman. Everything is Brahman. So at the very time you forget Brahman, remember it's Brahman. Everything is Brahman. So we say that prayer before meal times. You might say, Pastor, Brahmapanam Brahmavi, Brahmagno, when everything is Brahman. Or you might remember the fire in the stomach which gives me hunger to allow me to eat and digest my food, enjoy my food. That's Brahman. So all activity, it's just saying all activities, even when you forget me, is Brahman. Forget the self. So all offerings. So it's ritual, symbolic of all activities in the world. This is putting forward here. It's just like declaring all the waves in the ocean, the froth, the bubbles, everything that you see is still me, the ocean. You might see it differently. Or it's like saying everything on the tree, the trunk, the branch, the twig, the leaf, the fruit, every part of it is the tree. but you might see each one individually. And inevitably, every part of the awaker's mind, every part of the mind spreads into the dream. Everything in the dream is nothing but your mind. But we don't see it that way. So whoever understands all that's happening in the mind, understand it's just in the dream, is understand it's your mind. But because we don't understand, because we don't have this concept of the world, everything is Brahman. It's constantly asking you, what is this world? You've got to go beyond this world. Therefore, those who have reached that fourth plane of consciousness are trying to say to you, it's all nothing. Everything you think, you see, conceive, good, bad, indifferent, it's nothing but the Brahman, Brahman, Brahman alone. That's the declaration. So what's the advice? Fix yourself on the truth, Satyam. It's not telling you to forget about your family, your business, your work, where you're at. But it's trying to get you to amplify what you do in whatever you need to do. That's a sannyasi. Has a dispassionate passion. It's a mental attitude. It's not a physical retirement or resignation. Yet, as I often keep saying, in order to up yourself in your spiritual evolution, you do need to take yourself out of things to gain an objectivity. And hence why I always mention it's like going to school. We're spiritual infants. We need school to give us that capacity to be able to take on this knowledge and digest it. So places like the academy help that way. They're like schools. Otherwise, really, we're like reading this without going to school. We're in such an environment of distraction. It's gone before you've taken it. So we just need to nurture that a little bit. But so it's a mental resignation we're after. It's not a physical separation from your life. And you may need a little bit of that just to up it, to get that capacity. But sannyasis, spiritual people, the people like Sudama or King Janaka, it's not dependent upon what's outward. It's totally a mental, internal phenomenon. Sudama was a pauper. King Janaka was a wealthy king in the palace. It's not determined by that. So if we're to cultivate or elevate ourselves, we have to go within. Let's read a little bit.
Verse 15 avows the omnipresence of the self. The self pervades every object and being, every name and form, every bit and piece of the universe. In verses 16 to 19, Krishna, using the pronoun I, indicates that the self alone is the very substratum of the world. The pluralistic phenomena are mere expressions of the one self, Atman, Brahman. Brahman pervades the entire world just as your mind pervades your entire dream world. Your mind is the substratum of the dream world. Likewise, Brahman is the substratum of all the worlds. The 4 verses referred above persistently drive home this truth by detailing every part of the world as Brahman. There exists nothing apart from Brahman, God. God is everything, everywhere.
So in the next couple of verses, going to list things, just in case you forget. I think it's not there. It might be there, but it's not there. It makes a point. It's everywhere. It's trying to get everywhere. It's a mental attitude that you carry. If we understand that truly, fix ourselves in truth, and go about our life, if we really understand it, we'll all get onto it. If you really understand it, you take a next trip with me to Academy, please. What's the cost of that time in your life compared to what you're going to gain? It's nothing. You have to get over that obstacle of thinking, what do I need to do that for? Let's leave it there.
Thank you.
There you are.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bhagavad.